The woman who abandoned me 23 years ago just hired me to scrub her floors. She looked me straight in the eye, shook my hand, and didn't recognize her own daughter. In 60 seconds, I'll walk into her mansion as the help. And she has no idea that the girl carrying her laundry carries her blood. This is what happens when money buries guilt so deep. Even a mother's instinct goes silent. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Grace Morrison's hands trembled as she stood before the iron gates, staring up at a mansion that represented everything she'd never had. Stability, wealth, a place to belong. The photograph in her pocket felt heavy, worn thin from years of desperate clutching. It showed a young woman with dark eyes and a sad smile, holding a newborn baby. On the back, faded words, "I'm sorry. I had no choice." No signature, no explanation, just an apology that could never be enough for a lifetime of abandonment. She'd been told her mother died in childbirth, a comfortable lie that foster families repeated whenever little Grace asked why no one wanted her. But 6 months ago, while sorting through misfiled paperwork at the social services office, where she'd gone to request her records, Grace found the truth. Her mother hadn't died. Her mother had signed her away 3 days after birth. And her mother's name, printed in official black ink, was Helen Carrington. The same Helen Carrington whose ad for a live-in domestic assistant Grace had answered. The same woman who'd hired her over the phone without asking for references, desperate for help after her previous staff quit suddenly. The same woman who had no clue that fate was about to force her to face the daughter she'd erased. The intercom crackled. "State your name and business." Grace's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Grace Morrison. I'm the new hire starting today." The gates groaned open, and she walked through, each step taking her closer to answers she'd craved her entire life. The driveway stretched endlessly, lined with oak trees older than her abandonment. The mansion loomed ahead, 3 stories of white stone and tall windows that gleamed in the morning light. This was the life her mother had chosen, the life that didn't include her. A man in his 50s opened the door before Grace could knock. Sharp eyes and a weathered face assessed her immediately. "Miss Morrison, I'm Daniel Pierce, house manager. Mrs. Carrington is occupied at the moment. I'll show you to your quarters." His voice was professional, but something in his gaze lingered on her face a moment too long. "Have we met before?" Grace's heart kicked. "I don't think so." Daniel frowned slightly, then gestured for her to follow. "This way. Mrs. Carrington values discretion and efficiency. She's not unkind, but she keeps her distance, prefers things done quietly." He led her up a narrow back staircase, meant for invisible people doing invisible work. The 3rd-floor room was small but clean, a single window overlooking manicured gardens. "Your uniform is on the bed. Mrs. Carrington will see you in 30 minutes. After Daniel left, Grace sat on the edge of the bed, pulling out the photograph again. Would her mother see herself in Grace's face? Would some buried maternal instinct recognize the baby she'd held for 3 days before handing over to strangers? Or had Helen Carrington's guilt-built walls so thick that even blood couldn't penetrate them? The black uniform dress fit perfectly, though it felt like a costume. Grace stared at her reflection, seeing a girl dressed to be background scenery in someone else's life. Maybe that's all she'd ever been to Helen. An inconvenience, a problem solved by signing papers and moving on. When Grace entered the sitting room, sunlight poured through tall windows, illuminating a woman seated in a high-backed chair with a book in her lap. Helen Carrington. Grace's breath stopped. She'd imagined this moment countless times, but reality hit differently. Helen was elegant, maybe late 40s, with dark hair streaked silver and pulled into a neat twist. When she looked up, her eyes were the exact shade as Grace's own, a detail so obvious it seemed impossible no one else would notice. Helen studied Grace with a cool assessment, the way someone might evaluate furniture. "Miss Morrison, I trust Daniel explained the expectations." Grace forced words past the lump in her throat. "Yes, ma'am. I'm here to help with household management, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need." Helen nodded. I value order and privacy. I rarely entertain. Most days it's just you, Daniel, and myself. Sundays off. Salary as discussed. Questions. Every question Grace had ever had. But she shook her head. No, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. Helen's gaze held on Grace's face for a heartbeat longer than necessary, something flickering behind her eyes before vanishing. You may start with the upstairs rooms. Daniel has the supplies. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The first week crawled by in a routine of tasks and carefully maintained distance. Grace cleaned rooms that looked untouched by life. She prepared meals Helen ate alone, while Grace ate in the kitchen with Daniel. She learned the house's rhythms, the sound of Helen's footsteps, how she took her coffee, the way she stared out windows some afternoons like she was searching for something lost long ago. Every day, Grace looked for the right moment to reveal herself, to show the photograph, to demand answers. Every day, fear stopped her. What if Helen didn't care? What if she remembered and chose silence anyway? Daniel noticed everything. You watch her, he said one evening while they washed dishes. Not like the staff should. Like you're searching for something. Grace's hand stilled. I don't know what you mean. Daniel dried a plate slowly. I've worked for Mrs. Carrington 15 years. I know her secrets, or most of them. I know she had a daughter once, before her husband died. She never speaks of it, but I've seen how she looks at children sometimes, like she's measuring what she lost. Grace's pulse raced. What happened to the daughter? Daniel shook his head. Not my story. But be careful. Some truths don't free people. Sometimes they just break what's left. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She thought about Daniel's warning. Maybe he was right. Maybe Helen had moved on, built a life without room for the daughter she'd abandoned, and exposing the truth would only cause pain. But then Grace thought about all the nights crying herself to sleep, wondering why she wasn't wanted. All the birthdays alone. All the time watching other kids get picked up by parents who loved them while she waited for people who never came. Didn't she deserve answers? 2 weeks after Grace started, everything changed. She was cleaning Helen's study when she knocked over a picture frame on the desk. It fell face down with a sharp crack. Grace's heart sank, certain she'd broken something expensive. But when she picked it up, the glass was intact, and the photograph inside stopped her world. A newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. The same face Grace had stared at in her own photograph for 23 years. Same dark eyes. Same tiny fist. On the frame's border, engraved words. My greatest love. My deepest regret. This was her. Proof that Helen hadn't forgotten. She'd kept this photograph displayed privately, where no one would ask questions. Helen remembered. Helen carried the weight. And somehow that made it worse, knowing her mother thought about her, but never came looking. What are you doing? Helen's voice sliced through the room. Grace spun, still holding the frame. Helen stood in the doorway, pale, eyes fixed on the photograph in Grace's hands. I'm sorry, Grace stammered. I knocked it over by accident. I wasn't snooping. Helen moved forward stiffly and took the frame. She stared at the baby's face, and silence stretched between them. When Helen finally looked up, tears filled her eyes. She was perfect, Helen whispered. 3 days old. The nurses said she barely cried. Just looked around like she was trying to understand everything. Grace's throat closed. What happened to her? Helen's fingers traced the frame's edge. I gave her away. My husband came from old money, old expectations. When I got pregnant before marriage, he said it would destroy everything. His family's reputation. Our future. He made me promise that after birth, we'd place her for adoption. Tell everyone I miscarried. Start fresh. She laughed bitterly. I thought I could be strong enough to walk away. But when they put her in my arms, when I saw her face, I knew I was making the worst mistake of my life. And I did it anyway. Grace couldn't breathe. This was the moment. But words wouldn't come. Helen set the frame back, hands trembling. My husband died 5 years ago. Every day since, I've thought about her. I wondered where she was. If she's happy. If she thinks about me. If she hates me. She looked at Grace then, really looked, and recognition dawned slowly. Your eyes. I thought it was imagination, but your eyes are exactly like hers. Grace pulled her photograph from her pocket and held it out. Helen took it with shaking hands, staring at herself as a young woman. Where did you get this? Grace's voice cracked. It was with my adoption papers, along with your note, saying you had no choice. My name is Grace Morrison. I was born on April 15th, 23 years ago. You hired your daughter without knowing it. Helen's face crumpled. The photograph slipped from her fingers. She reached out, hands hovering between them like she was afraid Grace might vanish. No, this can't be real. They told me they named you Grace. Grace nodded through tears. I came here to confront you, to ask why I wasn't good enough. Why did you choose him over me? But now I don't know what I want anymore. Helen's voice broke. I chose wrong. Everything is wrong. I let him convince me reputation mattered more than you. I've paid for it every single day. I tried to find you after he died, but the adoption was closed. The agency said you had privacy rights, that if you wanted to find me, you would. So I waited, and hoped, and hated myself. What would you do if you discovered your mother had been searching for you all along? Would anger win, or would forgiveness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story gets even more emotional. They stood there, separated by years and inches that felt impossible to cross. Finally, Helen stepped forward. Can I hug you? Please. Grace didn't answer with words. She stepped into her mother's arms, and they collapsed into each other, sobbing, holding on like drowning people finding solid ground. I'm so sorry, Helen repeated. I'm so sorry. And Grace, who'd come angry and wanting revenge, found herself saying, I know. I believe you. Daniel found them an hour later, sitting on the study floor, holding hands and talking through tears. He stood in the doorway, crying too. I knew, he admitted quietly. The day you arrived, I knew. You have her eyes, her smile. But it wasn't my place to say. I hoped you'd both find the truth yourselves. Helen looked at him gratefully. You knew and didn't tell me? Daniel shook his head. Some things people need to discover themselves. Some reunions are too precious to interfere with. The months that followed weren't easy. Grace moved from staff quarters to a guest room. They had to learn from each other. All the missed years, all the moments that should have been shared. They couldn't reclaim them, but they could start now. They had dinners together, real conversations filling in gaps. Helen shared her childhood, the pressure to be perfect, how her husband controlled everything. Grace shared foster care, families that made her feel temporary, teachers who believed in her when no one else did. There were hard days when Grace's anger surfaced, when she couldn't help thinking about everything missed, every birthday and holiday Helen wasn't there for. Helen never made excuses. She listened. She apologized. She let Grace be angry without trying to fix it. And slowly, they began to heal. Helen helped Grace enroll in college, something Grace had dreamed of but thought impossible. I can't give you back the past, Helen said, but I can help build your future, if you'll let me. A year after Grace first walked through those gates, they stood together in the same spot, looking back at the mansion. Do you ever regret it? Grace asked. Coming here? Finding me? Helen took her daughter's hand, squeezing tight. The only thing I regret is the 23 years I lost. But finding you, knowing you, learning who you've become despite everything, that's the greatest gift I've ever received, even if it's one I didn't deserve. Grace leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Maybe none of us deserve the second chances we get. Maybe we just have to be brave enough to take them. Some stories don't have neat endings. Some wounds don't fully heal. But sometimes love is stronger than regret. Sometimes blood remembers, even when everything else forgets. And sometimes the people we lose find their way back. Not because the universe is kind, but because they refuse to give up searching. Grace and Helen couldn't reclaim the past, but they had the present. They had each other, and they had the rest of their lives to build something that looked like family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, and chosen, and enough. So I ask you this. If you were Grace, would you have revealed yourself? Would you have been able to forgive? And if you were Helen, could you live with the knowledge of what you'd lost? How do you measure the weight of a choice that changes two lives forever? Let us know in the comments what you would have done. These are the questions that remind us we're all human, all searching for redemption in our own ways. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your own life, the second chances you've given or received, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and make you think long after the video ends.